From Studio 4 in the world headquarters of RT America in our nation's capital, this is the News with Rick Sanchez.
And hi, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez. Last Friday, we were first to report a full 24 hours before any other news media that Iran was willing to admit that it accidentally shot down the Ukrainian airliner. We had that story, first because of our sources in Iran, and second because we were willing to ask the tough questions. Tonight, another blockbuster of a report regarding the real reason the United States felt it had to assassinate Qasem Soleimani. The Trump White House says Soleimani was killed because he was on the verge of killing Americans with some type of terrorist attack on 4 U.S. embassies. But to date, no one in or out of the administration has been able to confirm any such planned attack. And this weekend, Secretary of Defense Mike Esper threw even more cold water on this White House explanation, saying he saw no evidence of an imminent attack on embassies. In fact, it is appearing that the pretext for the assassination of Soleimani was at best a muddled, unconfirmed piece of bad intel, or at worst, a lie, just a blatant lie. On a matter so important that it could lead to war, is there a history of our government lying? Yeah. Vietnam. It began because of the Gulf of Tonkin incident, where in 1964, a U.S. destroyer came under attack from the North Vietnamese. Problem is, it never happened. In his memoirs, Secretary of State McNamara, the guy in charge back then, admits it was all made up. Iraq War #1, U.S. citizens who did not want us to go to war with Iraq were told that Saddam Hussein's soldiers were killing babies in Kuwait by taking them out of incubators in a hospital and throwing them on the floor, stepping on them. So said this tearful young lady who convinced Americans at the time that we should go to war.
They took the babies out of the incubators. Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor. It was horrifying.
Sounds terrible, right? That 15-year-old, she was lying. She was coached to do so by a PR company hired by the White House. The truth is, not a single baby was ever killed or taken out of incubators. And the so-called witness, it was later revealed by a Canadian investigative team that she was actually the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter who was a friend to President Bush. Iraq War #2.
Iraq declared 8,500 liters of anthrax, but UNSCOM estimates that Saddam Hussein could have produced 25,000 liters. If concentrated into this dry form, this amount would be enough to fill tens upon tens of thousands of teaspoons. And Saddam Hussein has not verifiably accounted for even 1 teaspoonful of this deadly material.
Sound convincing, right? That's U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell at the United Nations arguing that Iraq had WMDs. Because Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, and Tenet were not credible at the time, Powell was chosen and coaxed into giving that speech that led to the second war in Iraq. Today we know it, too, was a lie, and one that even Mr. Powell says he horribly regrets now. So now our government appears once again to be lying to us about an assassination that could lead to a war with Iran. So here's the question. If Soleimani wasn't planning an attack, then what is the real reason that he was snuffed out by a U.S. military drone? The answer, according to several global intelligence platforms like the Stratfor Group, who focus exclusively on geopolitical shifts for their investors, it's possibly this. Iran and Saudi Arabia were beginning the early stages of a détente of sorts, a coming together, a possible truce without, key here, without Washington's blessing. This truce was being mediated by Pakistan and Iraq. In fact, the reason that Soleimani arrived in Iraq on that day when he was hit with the drone that killed him, when he was assassinated, was to meet with Iraqi Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi, who would then take Soleimani's message and deliver it to the Saudis. He was the go-between. Why were the Saudis suddenly warming up to Iran? And why did that so bother the United States? Or was it maybe the Israelis that it led to having Soleimani eliminated? Was keeping the Saudis and the Iranians apart as enemies the real reason that Soleimani was assassinated? Man, this is big stuff, I'm telling you. This is the News with Rick Sanchez, where we get ahead of the news and we do stories the other guys won't even touch. You know why? Because we think it's time to do news again. Okay, here's our list of the questions we think you're going to be asking tomorrow. Was Soleimani killed just as he was about to do a deal with Saudi Arabia?